have one timeout left. 23-year-old Tony Pike waits for the snap, has the football, short drop, lobs one down the sideline for Binns. He's got it! Touchdown! 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 Armand Binns catches a perfect throw. There's a penalty flag back at the 30-yard line. It's on Pitt. Touchdown! Now the Bearcats.
Welcome to the Norse BenchWarmers podcast, now part of the CX Podcast Network. I'm your host, Joshua Northcutt, filling in today for Colton out in North Dakota. Joining me are my co-host, Alex Perez, the newest member of the group, Ben Burdett, and stepping in as director while Garrett's getting everything set up for a summer job in Nashville, the voice kind of known by the show, Andy Edwards. We've got an exciting episode for you and some things to come for the Norse BenchWarmers podcast, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I don't want to waste any more time for our special guest. Today, we are thrilled to welcome a voice well known to the Cincinnati sports fans, Dan Hoard. From the news desk to the play-by-play booth, Dan's career in Cincinnati has earned him numerous awards and Hall of Fame inductions. As the voice of the Bengals and the Bearcats radio, he has brought countless unforgettable moments to life. And on a personal note, Dan is someone who I've inspired to chase a dream of broadcasting sports in this profession due to. And I can get into that a little bit later more. So, Dan, thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to join the show.
Josh, Ben, Alex, Andy, it is my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, and I kind of told you in an email, due to you, I had my first appearance on Fox 19. You were walking around Georgetown trying to get fans to say TJ Hushmanzada before he was known as TJ Hushmanzada. And I got asked to say it, and I literally butchered the name poorly to the point all you got was a clip of me laughing trying to pronounce it.
Well, at least I didn't ask you to spell it, which would have been even harder. I can do that now after many years. Houshmandzadeh. So I still remember how to spell it. Don't check that that's correct, but just trust that I nailed it.
I'm going to trust you absolutely. So if you don't mind, like I said before we got on here, we're just going to go around the room, ask you a few questions about your career, maybe some UC sports, and then wrap things up with a few Bengals questions.
You bet. Fire away.
So you grew up in New York and graduated from the prestigious Syracuse University. What made you choose Cincinnati as your next stop?
Well, as is often the case, I followed a girl. So my wife, Peg, was my girlfriend at the time. She was also a Syracuse graduate from the Newhouse School of Communications. She got into TV news reporting and landed a job at Channel 12 in Cincinnati. So I was working in Syracuse at the time. I started looking for jobs in Cincinnati, and I met the news director at Fox 19 at a New Year's Eve party when I was visiting my then girlfriend, now wife. Carla Stanley was the news director at the time. We chatted at that party. We hit it off fairly well. I mentioned that if they ever had an opening, I would be interested in trying to land a job in Cincinnati. And sure enough, a few months later, out of the blue, she called to let me know that Kevin Frazier was leaving Cincinnati for Hollywood to become a big star in entertainment TV. And she asked for me to send my tape. So I did. And a little while after that, they flew me in for an interview and offered me the job. So my girlfriend was the reason why I started looking for jobs in Cincinnati, and fate worked out extremely well because this is home. I've lived in Cincinnati longer than anywhere else that I've ever lived in my life, and I have no intention of leaving.
That's actually really interesting. I feel like that's a common story. You find love, follow it, and then you find another true love in sports. So my first memories, as you mentioned, are a view of Channel 19. How exactly did you go from being a sports anchor to doing play-by-play, and what challenges did you face while doing so?
Well, my dream was always to do play-by-play. Specifically, baseball play-by-play really was my dream growing up, and I've been a minor league baseball announcer on a couple of different occasions. But you'll recall that when I started working at Fox 19, the station still had the contract to broadcast UC basketball games. They would do any game that wasn't on national TV back then, which was typically 10 to 15 games a year. So I got to do those games. It was during a great period in Bearcat basketball. I was the TV announcer for those 10 to 15 games during Kenyon Martin's senior year, when Cincinnati was the best team in the country. And I loved doing the play by play. I always enjoyed doing play by play more than I enjoyed being a TV anchor or reporter. So after Kenyon's senior year, the UC radio announcer at that time, George Von Benko, left, and there was an opening to do the games on the radio. And I decided that I would rather do every game, even if it was on radio, instead of just doing 10 to 15 on TV. So I applied for the job. They offered me the job. I went to my boss at Fox 19, John Lawhead, and said, I've loved working here. You guys have treated me great, but I really want to be a play by play announcer, and I'm going to leave to broadcast the UC games on the radio. And thankfully, John said, well, we don't want you to leave. How about doing both? And I didn't even know that that was possible. So for several years there, I continued working at Fox 19. I did the UC games on the radio. Eventually, I also added the Reds pregame show and postgame show on what was then Fox Sports Ohio. So I kind of had the best of three worlds for a while there when I was still working at Fox 19.
And then you mentioned, obviously, your love of baseball. So I had a question from a listener. You basically became the voice of Cincinnati sports and have experienced calling baseball in the past. Did you ever consider trying to get the Reds booth job when it became open, or was it more just UC sports and Bengals took up too much of your time?
No, I definitely tried to get the Reds job on a couple of occasions, and I interviewed for the job, and I was a finalist twice. Obviously, they didn't hire me. I have had the opportunity to broadcast quite a few Reds games as a fill-in, both on radio and TV, and have loved it. But, sometimes you don't get exactly what you want in life, and that was the case for me, but I have no complaints. I love what I'm doing now. It's probably a better life than being a baseball announcer, and I know that from having done it when I was broadcasting AAA baseball. Most recently for the Pawtucket Red Sox, it was 140 games in 144 days. My son was born my first year as the Pawtucket announcer. I basically wasn't around for the first 5 years of his life. So I love baseball. I love broadcasting baseball, but it is a very challenging life, particularly if you have a family. And being the Bengals announcer and the UC football and basketball broadcaster gives me big chunks of time off during the summer when my son is out of school, and I've been able to go on summer vacations and things that normal people get to do that aren't baseball announcers. So I think fate kind of dealt me a favor by not landing me the Reds job the two times that I tried to get it.
Alex, you had some questions as well?
Yeah, so my first one is, where is your favorite place you've called a game, or the wildest place you've called a game during your journey?
My favorite place is Fenway Park, so it gets back to doing baseball. When I was the announcer for their AAA team in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the Red Sox had a thing that they were doing during those years, and they may still be doing it, I don't know. But they would play a minor league doubleheader every year at Fenway. And more often than not, Pawtucket was involved in one of those two games. So I had the experience of broadcasting several games in Fenway Park, which is my favorite baseball park and probably my favorite sports venue that I've ever been to. So I put Fenway at the top of the list. In terms of the bottom of the list, there were some minor league ballparks, particularly when I first started out. That was my first job after I graduated from college. I was broadcasting minor league baseball games. And back then, some of those minor league parks were not necessarily broadcast friendly. The old Tidewater Tides, which is in Norfolk, Virginia, had it was called Metropolitan Park. Marty Brenneman used to broadcast games there early in his career, but the broadcast booth was basically at ground level behind home plate. There were just a few seats in front of the broadcast booth, and in those seats sat the players' wives and girlfriends, and in some cases, their kids. So you would hear their conversations just as clearly as you would hear my broadcast, which did not necessarily make for great radio. In some cases, these were Spanish-speaking wives and girlfriends. So the background noise, who knows, whether it was entertaining or not, but it was definitely not ideal from a broadcasting perspective.
Well, my second question, you've obviously had a very fantastic career calling these games. So I'm interested to hear, what would you say is your funniest mess up on a call you've ever had?
Well, this is not a mess up per se, but I would say that this is my most embarrassing moment on the air. When I was a TV sports anchor in Syracuse, New York, I went on the air one weekend where I had a pretty nasty cold. I was trying to gut it out, like the athletes themselves. I'm going to fight my way through it and not ask for anybody else to fill in. And I reached a point during this broadcast where, like, I felt a cough coming on. We've all experienced this. The thing to do if you feel a cough coming on is just cough. The cough may be slightly embarrassing on the air, but if you suppress it, then it gets worse. And then you can't even like really get the words out. And that happened to me on live TV so bad that they had to cut to a commercial. They cut to the commercial. Members of the crew are sprinting toward me with glasses of water. I'm gulping down this water. It was kind of like Albert Brooks sweating to death in the movie Broadcast News. So I slurped down multiple glasses of water. We fade back up. And sure enough, within a few seconds, I have to cough again. Second time around, I wisely coughed. But that's probably the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me on the air.
That's pretty funny. So play-by-play is definitely something I want to get into in my career. So for somebody who may not have too many opportunities to get in the booth right off the bat, what would be some advice you have for people trying to practice the art of play-by-play?
My biggest advice is that you don't have to be on the air to practice. And I am living proof. When I was a kid, probably 12 or 13 years old, I would turn the sound down on the TV. I would bust out my cassette tape recorder back when those still existed, and I would practice with the sound down on the TV, just doing play by play. And then when I was a student at Syracuse, in order to get what they call cleared to go on the air and broadcast the Syracuse University games on student radio, you have to submit tapes of you broadcasting games in the stands. So me and my buddies would be in the student section in the Carrier Dome from Syracuse basketball games. And there we are holding little tape recorders in front of our faces, broadcasting the games. So there's nothing to prevent you from from doing that. And to take it a step further, one year when I was broadcasting minor league baseball, my partner was a guy named Ken Levine. Ken is the guy who wrote me into an episode of The Simpsons. And his background before broadcasting baseball was screenwriting. And he wrote for many of the most popular TV shows of all time. He wrote for MASH. He wrote for Cheers. He wrote Simpsons. He wrote Frasier. He wrote for a wide variety of shows. So a highly successful screenwriting career, an Emmy Award-winning screenwriting career. But Ken always had this dream of broadcasting baseball because he grew up in LA listening to Vin Scully, and Vin Scully was his hero. So one year, he bought 2 tickets in the upper deck of Dodger Stadium. He would set his tape recorder and books and stats in one and sat in the other and called 81 games into a tape recorder. So again, this is a highly successful, well-paid Hollywood screenwriter for some of the greatest shows of all time. And he had that burning desire so much that, again, he did 81 games into a tape recorder in the upper deck at Dodger Stadium. So if this is really a dream of yours, if my friend Ken Levine can do it, then anybody can do it, at least to get the training and the practice that's required to try to develop some skill level at the art of play-by-play.
That's awesome. I'll remember that. Ben, you had some questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering. I know you've been in the game for such a long time. What if you could tell yourself one thing before even the Syracuse days that you know now? What would that be?
That every game is its own story. So I get the question a lot of times, and this was really true when I was doing baseball. How do you do a game when the team stinks? Because if you do it long enough, hopefully you'll have a lot of opportunities to call great wins and championships and things like that. But inevitably, you are going to be the announcer for a team that stinks. That was the case in my baseball days. The Bengals not too long ago started a season 0-11. The Bearcats have had their ebbs and flows over the years. So I always try to remember that every game is its own story. You never know what you're going to see when the game begins. And even if your team loses, there could be something in that game that you have never seen before that you will remember forever. So you prepare for every game the same, whether your team is good or bad. And then when the light goes on, you are trying to do the best possible job of describing that game, making it entertaining, and informing your audience that you possibly can.
That's awesome. And you mentioned, things that you've never seen before. With you doing radio all these years, what's like the craziest moment that you've had to somehow describe to your radio listeners that, they can't see what's going on. So you have to try to convey it to them. And how did you do that?
That would be my broadcast partner, Chuck Mayshock, getting kicked out of an NCAA tournament game for yelling at the officials. So it's the only time it's happened in the NCAA tournament. And I certainly never anticipated doing the play-by-play of my partner getting the heave-ho. So that's the first thing that immediately comes to mind. But on a more serious note, the Damar Hamlin situation a few years ago. So we're on the air. We are getting no information from the NFL, much like TV. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman weren't getting any information either for obvious reasons. There was really not much information for the NFL to share initially. So what I tried to do under those circumstances was just to open my eyes as wide as I could, be as descriptive as I possibly could be, and not say anything that I didn't know. There was no point in trying to guess, to try to anticipate what might be happening down there. All you can do is be as descriptive as you can, try to get everything right, and pray that you get nothing wrong.
Yeah, it's the way to be. I mean, you don't want to speculate anything. Don't want to get anything wrong. So, Josh?
Yeah, Andy, I know you have a question for Dan as well.
Yeah, Dan, question about, so like, I know you're doing UC football, you're doing Bengals football, and then right after those seasons are done, they're not even done like at that time as well. You've got UC basketball like starting up. How are you able to keep your work-life balance? Kind of like, you have to have that time kind of off. You gotta kind of relax at times. It's just like, how do you keep yourself sane, like kind of doing this job and also like heading out and doing like your broadcast as well?
Well, I don't. So I don't have much life balance during the time of the year that the three overlap, because there is a several week stretch when the college basketball season gets underway where I'm doing all three. So I've got UC football on Saturday, the Bengals Sunday, unless, of course, the Bengals are playing on a different day of the week, and then one or two UC basketball games. So really during that stretch, there's not much life. It's prepping for the game. It's getting to the game. It's trying to do it as well as I can. And then, fleshing out the information from that game and inserting the information for the one coming up and turning my focus to that. But let's face it, I'm unbelievably lucky to have the opportunity to do both. Right now, I'm the only person who is doing the local radio call of the college football team and the NFL team in the same market. When the Bengals hired me in 2011, there were a few guys that were doing both. The Pittsburgh announcer did Pitt and the Steelers. The Falcons announcer did Georgia Tech on Saturday and the Falcons on Sunday. So, and the Florida State announcer did Tampa Bay on Sunday. So there were a few guys doing the double dip. Now there aren't. The Pitt Steelers guy only does Pitt. The Florida State Tampa Bay guy only does Tampa Bay. And the Georgia Tech Falcons guy still does a college game on Saturday, but it's not Georgia Tech anymore. He does an ACC game for ESPN, and then he does the Falcons on the radio. So again, I'm incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to do both. There are times of the year where I don't get a lot of sleep, but it's a blessing, not a curse. I'm living the dream. And in some ways, reality has exceeded my dreams. I would have been very happy, I think, to go back to my tiny hometown in upstate New York and call the high school game of the week. I just wanted to do sports broadcasting in some way, shape, or form. And obviously, I dreamed of doing it at the highest level, but that's never guaranteed. So I got into the career that I dreamed of doing, and I've reached a level that I'm very lucky to have reached.
Dan, really quick, I just had a question about New York. Is it true about how much snow you guys get up there at Syracuse?
Yes,
Oh
it
my
is
god.
100% true.
I
I
could
think
never.
Syracuse averages something like 150
Oh
inches
my
of
god.
snow per year. And I grew up in Lakewood, New York, which is south of Buffalo. So as soon as you hear the word Buffalo, you think of snowstorms. So when I moved to Cincinnati in 2006, I thought I had moved to a tropical paradise. When people complain about snow here, I scratch my head and think, what snow? We get less than 10 inches of snow per year on average. So I'm happy to have endured the years that I endured in Syracuse and in Lakewood. It was a great place to grow up and a great place to go to school, but I
Nice.
definitely do not miss the weather.
Right.
Since we talked a little bit about UC, I have a question from a listener, Timmy. He said UC basketball has struggled to miss the tournament every year since Mick Cronin left in 2019. So Timmy asked, what do you think made Cronin so successful during his time at UC that maybe other coaches haven't been able to replicate? And do you have any fun stories or memories that you can share of Mick?
Well, Mick's a great coach, first and foremost, so his success speaks for itself, not only at UC, but what he's done since at UCLA with a Final Four appearance and an Elite Eight. But here's something to remember about Mick Cronin. He didn't make the NCAA tournament until his fifth year. Wes Miller's going into his fifth year this year. So there are some similarities there, and I am confident that Wes is going to take Cincinnati to the NCAA tournament this year, and hopefully from here on, he'll have the type of run that Mick Cronin had after those initial years where he had to build things up in the Big East. And in Wes's case, it's the Big 12, which is very similar to what the Big East was back when Mick was the coach. The other half of the question was something like an amusing Mick story.
Yeah, any
Was
kind of
that?
any kind of funny story or something that you, I guess, kind of remember with Mick that you're allowed to
One
say.
thing, yeah, one thing that just, people may have heard this, I'm not sure, but Mick is wound so tight and is so nervous on game day that he can't eat. So, on the rare occasion when Cincinnati played a game really late, like the Big East Tournament Championship game that tipped off at 9 o'clock, Mick would have not eaten anything all day. So after those games, nobody was ever hungry. It was like Thanksgiving dinner when you don't eat anything during the course of the day because you want to be as hungry as you can possibly be. So you completely overeat. Well, that was what Mick was like on game day for UC, especially when it was a late night game. So that's kind of an amusing thing that I remember about him, the fasting leading up to the game and the feasting that followed after the game. And when we were on the road, I was treated to some great meals, particularly after victories, where Mick was finally able to indulge now that his stomach was not wound in knots. And those were some great memories of those years when he was the UC coach.
Alex, do you have a UC question?
Yeah, my only question I had was, you do both the college football and college basketball. So for the fans at home, which one would you say has a better outlook heading into the season?
Well, I'm bullish on both, to tell you the truth. So UC football wrapped up spring practice a couple of weeks ago. I was at almost every practice that they held, and I was very impressed. You start with the guys that they were able to hold on to that all could have either left for more money in NIL from a big time program, or, Cincinnati is a big time program, but you know what I mean, one of the blue bloods, so to speak, or in some cases, guys that could have gone to the NFL. So we're talking about Joe Royer, who definitely would have been an NFL draft pick. Todd McShay recently forecasted that he will be a first round pick in next year's draft. Dante Corleone would have been an NFL draft pick, but his stock wasn't as high as it should be because he had the blood clots last year and couldn't train for 3 months. Now that he's back to normal, hopefully he will, improve his draft stock. Brendan Sorsby was courted by several other schools to try to leave Cincinnati and play quarterback elsewhere. It seems like any good quarterback nowadays there are schools out there trying to poach him. So fortunately, Sorsby elected to stay. So you begin with that trio. And then in the transfer portal, they added several excellent wide receivers. Jeff Caldwell immediately comes to mind. When you watch him play, you're going to think that you're, looking at T. Higgins 2.0, big, strong, 6'5" guy with a huge catch radius and the ability to go up and over people and make catches. Cyrus Allen came from Texas A&M. He can fly, so they're going to add that element. Cincinnati was able to lure Wisconsin's leading running back, Tawee Walker, who had 10 touchdown runs last year. So they really beefed up position groups of need in the portal. And I think they're going to be good. I would anticipate a winning record in a bowl game this year, which will be Scott Satterfield's third year as head coach. And as for basketball, again, I do think that this is going to be an NCAA tournament team this year. Mustafa Cham is one of the top recruits or top transfers in the country. I think he's the best 7-footer that was in the transfer market, and Cincinnati was able to lure him from UCF. Kirk Risa, when healthy, has been an excellent college basketball player. He led the Pac-12 in assists twice when he was at Arizona. I didn't see a better defensive player in the Big 12 than Sincere Harris, who they were able to lure from West Virginia. And, Jizzle James and Day Thomas stayed, among others. So I think Wes Miller's put together a really good roster, and hopefully this is the year that Cincinnati breaks through. And just like I said with Mick Cronin, in year 5, hopefully Wes gets to the tournament and begins a long run, just like Mick did.
I won't lie, Dan. I'm extremely excited now to talk about football and get to football because a few of those names I did not know were coming along. But Ben, you had a question?
Yeah, just one more thing about UC basketball. You mentioned Wes Miller and his ability to create a great team out of the transfer portal, but how about the recruiting classes he's been able to bring in since he's been in Cincinnati this year, obviously highlighted by Sean Abayev? What, other than NIL, what do you think about Wes gets these big recruits to come to Cincinnati?
Well, I think Wes is a tireless recruiter. It starts there. The guy, I almost fear for his health at times because he works nonstop, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. I mean, his work ethic is unbelievable, and much of that is devoted to recruiting. But he's got a lot to sell. Cincinnati has obviously a tremendous basketball tradition dating back to the Big O and the national championship teams in the early 60s. More recently, tremendous years under Coach Huggins and then under Mick. Long tradition of going to the tournament year after year after year. And now he's also selling a team that's in the Big 12, which this past year wasn't the best conference in the country. I think we all would agree that the SEC was. But if you look back over the past 10 years, the Big 12 has probably been the best conference in 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, something like that. So a great program with a great history, tremendous fan support, and one of the best leagues in the country to recruit to is a pretty formidable combo. And he's been able to use that to get great high school players. You mentioned Sean Abayev, their first McDonald's All-American in several years, and the guys that he's lured in the portal as well.
And if you got enough time, we're going to talk a little quickly about Bengals football. Is that
sure?
Okay. Andy, you got the first question?
Okay, so I really want to know your input on this because, Bengals have been, kind of from that Super Bowl run, now they're not kind of making that playoff. They are just falling one game behind, really, really short. How are they going to get over this hump? Because, we see their draft picks, we see who they're drafting. What are some other things that they can do to kind of get over this hump?
Well, let's start with what they did this offseason.
Very true.
First and foremost, they kept Jamar and they kept T. So by doing that, I think they have virtually guaranteed that they are going to be one of the highest scoring teams in the NFL.
Okay.
They were last year, and assuming that Joe Burrow stays healthy, they will be this year. I mean, I don't think there's another team in the league that has as much skill position talent as Cincinnati. Jamar, T, Mike Gesicki, Chase Brown, Samaje Perine, Taj Brooks in the draft. I mean, the weaponry that the Bengals have built up on offense is unbelievable. I think the offensive line play is going to be better. So you begin with that. You begin with a team that's virtually guaranteed of being one of the top scoring teams in the league. So the big question then is, how can they be better on defense? Well, first and foremost, they can't be any worse. I mean, they were one of the worst defensive teams in the league last year, unfortunately. I think they lost 5 games where they scored 30 or more points, which is hard to do. So they brought in Al Golden to be the defensive coordinator. I think Al is one of the best in the business. And what's different from Al and the guy he replaced, Lou Anarumo, is that I think Al is more comfortable working with and playing younger guys. He's been doing it, obviously, for the last 3 years as the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. But the way the Bengals' salary structure is right now, they're going to have to be younger and cheaper on defense because of the money that they're paying Joe, Jamar, and T. That's just the way it is. And I think Al Golden is uniquely suited to being able to get the best out of these young guys. They've drafted a lot of young defensive talent in the last 4 years in the first 2 days of the draft. They've had 13 draft picks in the first 3 rounds in the last 4 years, if you can follow that. And 10 of the 13 have been on defense. So it's time for these guys to step up. And a lot of people have said, well, this guy's a bust or that guy's a bust. Well, how do we know if they don't play? I mean, do we really know if Miles Murphy is going to be good or not if he doesn't get on the field much? So he's going to get his opportunity this year. And my hope and belief is that with Al Golden as the coordinator and Jerry Montgomery as the defensive line coach with a great track record at Green Bay, the guys like Miles Murphy are going to be major contributors going forward. And maybe the defense is not going to be top 5 or top 10, but it doesn't have to be if the offense is one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL.
Yeah.
If they can just get the defense to the middle of the pack level, then the Bengals are going to be one of the best teams in the AFC. And if they can get back into the playoffs, you know, the proof is in the pudding. We know what they can do once they're in the postseason with Joe Burrow at quarterback.
They can make a run. They can definitely do it.
They can make a run.
And then I have one last question for you, Dan, before we let you go. Your coffin nails, bam, 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 with Dave to a Bengals victory has become music to the ears of Bengals fans. We all look forward to it on Sundays. You may have said this story before. I apologize not having heard it yet. But how did that exactly come up? Was it you? Was it Dave? How did that happen?
Excellent coffin nails sign in the background, by the way. I appreciate the signage. So well done there. So the coffin nails bam, bam, bam thing was completely organic. My first year as the Bengals play-by-play announcer was 2011. That was Lap's 26th year in the booth. I don't remember what game it was, but at some point early in that season, it might have been week 3 against Buffalo or something like that. But the Bengals made the play that essentially clinched the victory. And I just said, as a matter of expression, it wasn't like a expression that I use often, but I just said coffin nails. And Lap, again, without prompting, without any sort of scripting on our part, immediately said, bam, bam, bam. So as I was driving home after that game, the post-game host, Alan Cutler, back then, was playing the highlights, and they played that highlight, and I heard it, and I thought, I kind of like that. Maybe we can kind of make that a thing. So we did it again the next time that the Bengals made that play that essentially clinched the victory. And again, I kind of liked the sound of it. And that became and this one belongs to the Reds. So we've basically been doing it ever since. I did forget it in a game a year or 2 ago, which I took a lot of heat for on social media. I guess people have come to expect that coffin nails moment. But I'm glad people seem to like it. I haven't gotten sick of doing it yet. Hopefully Lap continues to be the Bengals radio analyst for many, many years to come, because when we reach that day, again, and I hope this is not coming anytime soon, where Lap decides to retire, we'll probably have to retire coffin nails, bam, 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 because the bam, bam, bam is just as a big a part of the saying as the coffin nails is, and that's his.
And I've been one of those people. I heard Mo Egger kind of mention it, but Lap should be one of those guys who almost has like a special section in the Ring of Honor, and I would put his number and his name underneath the radio booth. What's your thoughts on that?
That's a great call. So I've been joking that this year I have 3 wishes. Wish number 1, a cure for baldness.
I can second that one, Dan.
There you go. Wish number 2, that the Bengals win the Super Bowl, and I have that thrill of calling the Super Bowl victory. And then wish number 3, that Lap is elected into the Bengals Ring of Honor. And this would be the perfect year to do it. Lap was a Bengals player for 10 years. This will be his 40th year in the booth. So any NKU student can do the math. That's 50 years overall that Dave Lapham has been a part of this franchise. What a perfect time to put him into the Ring of Honor. I suspect it's going to happen. I think as more and more people that have a vote, the season ticket holders, realize that this is his 50th year with the franchise. There's just such perfect symmetry to making it kind of a 50th anniversary recognition of all he's meant to the Cincinnati Bengals. A great player to begin with, starter on their first Super Bowl team, 10 years as the ultimate jack of all trades on the offensive line. He played every position in a game on multiple occasions, and obviously did that at various points during his 10-year tenure, and now 40 years in the broadcast booth, entertaining and informing Bengals fans, as well as anybody that does it on the radio in the country. So all kidding aside, that is really my biggest wish, because that's the first thing that could come true, and hopefully it does when season ticket holders have the opportunity to select 2 new members this year.
I'm gonna say I get a vote in that, and he's got my vote. I think the last 2 years. I guess back to Chad Johnson, so that I think it would have been 2 years, 3 years. But I believe that's all the questions we have for you today, Dan. We greatly appreciate everything. Again, I just want to say a big thanks to Andy for stepping in as director today. And of course, Ben, Alex for amazing questions as well and being an awesome co-host. Also, a special shout out to Bill Ferraro and NKU Media Services, who behind the scenes set all this up to help us be able to do the Zoom call today. Again, one last time, Dan, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, now under the CX Podcast Network, and follow us on Twitter/X at CX Pod Network to stay updated on our latest episodes and content. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Carr throws into traffic, intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football. Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about